Joining us now to talk crypto regulation in the upcoming election, Arkansas Congressman French Hill, and Vice Chair of the Finance Committee and Chair of the Digital Assets Subcommittee. Congressman, it's good to see you. Welcome. How are you?
Hey, Joe. Good to be with you.
It's widely thought there'd be a light touch across the board on a lot of regulations, maybe, antitrust. We've heard about crypto, but he's the former president is a mercurial guy that can change his mind, whether it's about TikTok or take your pick. Do you have a high degree of confidence that the environment would be better for Bitcoin and other crypto assets if the former president, maybe I got vice president on my mind because of what's happening today. But do you think the former president would be more friendly?
Well, Joe, it's good to be with you. Look, I think our Fit for Purpose Fit 21 Act that we passed in the House with 71 Democratic votes is exactly the kind of framework that President Trump would support were he reelected and brought back to the White House, because it directs the SEC and the CFTC precisely what kind of regulatory framework we need for crypto, for people who are innovating and starting a token crypto-related firm, how to trade, how to custody those assets, how to make sure consumers are protected. So that framework, I think, is the right approach, and I think that's what I would recommend to the president that he endorse if we haven't passed it between now and the end of this Congress.
You, as a vice chair of the Financial Services Committee, what else would you expect from a reelected President Trump?
Well, on the Financial Services Committee, I think you'll see that President Trump wants to be a pro-growth, pro-innovation president, and therefore something like the Fed and the supervisors are considering now, this Basel III new capital standards for our commercial banking industry. I think that's a very pro-cyclical approach, meaning it will exacerbate downturns. It's a approach that we don't need. It's an approach that even the banks in Europe are generally rejecting. So I would hope that President Trump would reject something like full implementation of Basel III and use a much more tailored, appropriate view to bank regulation as well.
Congressman, one of the things that we hear a lot about is his plans for tariffs on China and others, and the inflationary effects that could create. You look at some of the reports in terms of when people try to do their estimates of what that could mean. And the one thing that I'm sort of yet to be convinced about, but maybe you have a different view, is that I'm not sure that he would actually necessarily go through with all of these tariffs, even though I know he says that he would, and that they are more potentially as a political cudgel that would be used to negotiate for other things from a China. But I don't know if you think we should take it at face value and take the estimates as what they are, in which case we would have enormous inflation. That would actually be a real headwind, or we should look at it as something else.
Well, Andrew, I think it's a good question. I spent a lot of time in trade when I was a White House staffer for President George H.W. Bush. The Trade Policy Review Group was part of my responsibility looking at tariffs and other trade-related negotiations. And I think you're right. I believe that President Trump says to our countries, from big countries, huge trading partners like China, to others, we're going to impose tariffs on you if you dump goods in our market, dump goods in third countries that then get sold in the United States. And that it is, as you say, a cudgel to bring people back to the negotiating table and have a fair trading relationship. We saw President Reagan do this in the late 1980s with Japan. I think this is the right approach because, as you say, across the board tariffs imposed on all imported goods, obviously that's going to contribute to inflation and not necessarily increase production of those similar goods here in the United States.